Welcome to Always Receiving Noor, weekly Quran study. We are continuing to study Surah 19, Surah Maryam, Mary, and we had started from the beginning of the Surah, and we first encountered Prophet Zechariah's situation and his prayer, and the way in which that prayer was fulfilled in a way that really went beyond his imagination and even surprised him. And then from there on, we moved on to now to talk about Maryam's story, and that was that is another level of surprise, even shock, the way in which she gets the news of a child, and the way in which she responds to that almost incredible news and difficult position that ensues from there. So is there anybody who would like to share anything from last time? Anything that stayed with you? For me, one major takeaway was the reference that Sister Yamina made to the verse that says, those are the ones who are patient at times of adversity, and they say, from him we come and to him we return. And that awakens me to some extent, to think that it gave me a measure in the way in which I'm responding to difficulties in my life. I tend to think, how can I solve it? How did I get into this trouble? What am I doing wrong? And then, and also in that process, I oftentimes find myself actually implicitly resenting that. Why did I end up with this? Even though there must be wisdom behind it, but deep down, a part of me is still resenting why of all things I had to deal with this, and this isn't what I should be going through now. And contrasting that with Maryam's attitude, and then with that verse that gives us a principle about the best way to respond if you are awakened, if you are not blind to the signs around you, then your primary response will be to remember that, wait a second, I come from him and I return to him, and why should I resent? I should welcome the situation, even if it's not comfortable. That's one thing out of, it was a vast class, but one thing that struck me personally. So if there isn't anybody else who wants to share, then we will turn to Sister Yamina to lead us in tonight's session, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Sister Yamina. And thank you everyone for joining.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So last week we did go through who Maryam was, how she was described in the Quran, and her story as it is told in different parts of the Quran, and the situation and the general lessons we can get, some of the lessons at least. And this week, inshallah, we'll follow verse per verse in Surat Maryam, and we'll see whatever we can, inshallah, reflect and benefit from the guidance of this in this surah, and especially in the story of Maryam alayhi salam. I'll start with ayah 16. That's where the story starts. Maryam's story starts. And we're told mention or remember اذكر in the book Maryam. She excused herself from her family to an eastern place. And I think the original is واذكر في الكتاب مريم إذ انتبذت. Okay, yeah, that's so here it's not only excused, but انتبذت, the verb انتبذت means to move away from anything which attracts one's attention. So anything that distracts us, there is an intention to move away from it. So it's not only excusing herself away from her family, but also secluding herself, isolating. There is an intention to isolate herself and live in seclusion, as we understand from the next ayah. And so it's understood that if she's intending to leave everything behind, then her intention is to worship God alone. It's something like itikaf during Ramadan. And the translation here is to an eastern place, مكان شرقية, and the مكان شرقية is literally a place in the east, but at the same time, مشرق or شرق is the place where the sun rises. And actually the original meaning of the word شرق is to fill something with light, and it becomes sunrise because it's the place where the light, the sun, rises. So it's interesting that you can understand both meanings in that word. So it could be eastern, and when it's when a word like this is chosen in the Quran, it is part of the sign, which means it probably was in the east. And also there is this allusion to light. And she secluded herself away, whereupon we send up onto her our spirit, who appeared to her in the form of a well-made human being, basharan sawiya. And as we mentioned last week, the consensus is that the spirit, the ruh here mentioned, is angel Gabriel alayhi salam. So Gabriel was made to appear to Mary in the shape of a well-made human being. And we know from many hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad والسلام, with his companions, that angels may take the form of human beings so that they become accessible to our perception. So this is the way she could perceive him and see him. And Maryam is scared, and immediately she seeks refuge with the merciful. You can see that she is a pious woman, because what comes immediately to her tongue is seeking refuge with the merciful. And that's also telling us that if we live with that consciousness of being a abd, of being a servant of the divine, of the consciousness of seeing the divine signs in everything, then when something unwanted happens, immediately we go back to him for help. And so she seeks refuge not with God, not with the term used is Ar-Rahman, the merciful. Truly, she said, truly I seek refuge with the most merciful against you if you are conscious of him. And this is nice as well. It's again another sign. The language is always a sign, telling us how she, in her fear, let's say, she felt the need for mercy, and so she calls onto God by his name, merciful. She calls onto his mercy. And he said, so the angel, he answers her, and he says, I'm only a messenger of your sustainer, come to grant you a pure boy. Again, it's interesting how Jibril alayhi salam answers. He doesn't say, I am a messenger of God, which is correct. He doesn't say, I am a messenger of my Rabb, but he says, I am a messenger of your Rabb, of your sustainer, which is, again, you can see the wisdom and the compassion. So she feels the relief, and that it's her Rabb who is taking care of her and sending him. He's not alien. So she said, how can I have a son when no man has ever touched me and I have never been unchaste? So here, from one point of view, she's surprised, like Zakaria alayhi salam, when he asked for a child, for an heir, for a child. It depends on which ayah. And when his prayer is answered, his first response was, how can I have a child when I'm old and my wife is old and barren? Here, she again emphasizes that no man has ever touched her. And I think this is the fact that it is mentioned explicitly is again a sign, a message that makes it clear that the conception of Jesus, of Isa alayhi salam, is miraculous. Miraculous in the sense that it's unusual, in the sense that he truly didn't have a mortal father as we know, as normally we would expect a conception to be. And I think this is very important, the fact that this is repeated, because if it was not explicit, we may be tempted to say, or maybe, maybe he actually had a father, maybe something happened. And that way, we would not realize what's going on in this story. And by closing that door before us, closing the possibility that the possibility that we entertain that maybe there was a touching, maybe there was something going on, because that possibility is totally closed, then we have to come back and stop and try to make sense of what's going on. Make sense of the miracle. What's going on in this miracle? Something unusual is going on. Something astonishing is going on. Can it be understood in any ways? What does it mean? And that's what listening to the Quran is about. Not reading in it what I think it means, or I think I know, because if I'm reading the Quran, I'm expecting it to bring me something totally new. If it were something I knew before reading it, then there would be no need to read it. And it's still not telling me stories, just like bedtime stories. These stories are important and significant messages from God about the unseen, about the wajhullah in everything, about the meaning of life, the purpose of our journey on earth, the meaning of life and death, and the hereafter. So something very, very important is going on here, and that's why I find this explicitly saying that no man has ever touched her is very significant. So going back to her surprise, it reminds us of Zakaria alayhi salam. And her answer is practically like, how come? It's almost like, how can it be possible when no one has ever touched me? And obviously she has in mind the usual causes of pregnancy. And like any one of us, she was assuming that a woman could only bear a child through being together with a man. And subhanallah, this is the Maryam who had fruits miraculously brought to her. Remember in Surat Al-Imran, we told Zakaria comes into the mihrab, he finds fruit with her. She said, oh, this is God, he gives to whoever he wills. And that's when Zakaria alayhi salam decided to ask for a son explicitly, when he witnessed her miracle. And yet she's still baffled by the news of having a son without father. So this means something very important is going on. It means that it's human to take the habitual causal order for granted. And it also means that it's going to require a conscious effort to learn to see the divine will beyond causes, beyond the things themselves, beyond the young father and mother, beyond the healthy, fertile mother, beyond the fruit coming from the tree, from an orchard. So another thing that comes to mind is that it's very, very wise for the Quran here to introduce us to Zakaria alayhi salam's miracle before that of Maryam alayhi salam. In the case of Zakaria alayhi salam, it was a little bit easier to, let's say, to swallow, not to grasp, because I'm not sure how much we grasp it, but at least it was easier. He was the one who asked for the child, and there were still two parents. Yes, they were old. The mother was barren. But it was still, like, it was miraculous, but not as much as the case of Maryam alayhi salam. I mean, here we presented with something really astonishing, really hard to grasp, to deal with. So it was like a preparation. We were prepared with the case of Zakaria, and now we have the case of Maryam. And so we can understand, we can relate to her surprise, her fear. She hadn't asked for anything, and she's told she's going to have a child without a father. It's easy to relate to her plight, and also to admire, like Isra just mentioned, her attitude, her surrendering, submissive attitude to the divine decree, to the divine will concerning her situation, because it's definitely not an easy situation, definitely very, very, very hard, especially for a young woman to be in that situation, especially in that society, and probably in many, many societies nowadays too.
Last time you used the word tragedy for this.
Yeah, it does sound tragic, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at it from that perspective,
And that's how we're supposed to listen to the messages in this story. To listen means to not just to listen and intellectually only, but listen to our heart with our emotions. When we hear this story, what does it bring into our hearts? What emotions come if we truly try to imagine ourselves in her stead? And again, we witness how human these people were. Zakaria alayhi salam, his wife, Maryam alayhi salam, and how belief requires surrender. So it's not only that they were believers, but what makes the difference between them and us is that they surrendered. When they understood something, they acted on it. They surrendered to the divine will. That makes the whole difference. To understand is one thing, to believe is one thing, but that belief is only going to bear fruit when we act on it. And in this case, the first action is to surrender, because here there is no outward action. Actually, it's like in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, sometimes not shouting, not crying, not rebelling is the surrender. So it could be that the action that Maryam alayhi salam is taking it's an action of surrender, which is she refrains from resisting, she accepts the situation.
And also this reminds me of Sister Yamina, if I may add this. The reference that Imam Nursi has, the comparison between two people who encounter something scary out of the blue, and then the person with a believing heart is scared, but his overall conviction that this is a world sustained by a wise and powerful and compassionate being gives context to that fear. So even though he's also very scared, he's not as scared as the person who hasn't confirmed that this world has an owner who's compassionate and powerful and wise. So he gets scared in a comparatively in a much more way. He's really scared because he doesn't have an overall framework. So we can think of Maryam. Yeah.
There is hope in this fear. There is meaning in this fear. There is purpose. Whereas when there is no belief, there is despair.
It's just terrifying, and that's it. And here she must be, concerned that all of a sudden she's getting pregnant, but this is also happening through divine will, and she knows God from before. So she
underlying.
Yeah. It's a different
trust is there. That's true. Tawakkul is there. Yeah. It's also you were answering your question once about fearing the day of judgment. If you remember, and we said
yes, I remember. Yes, yeah.
Fear and fear. There is being terrified, and there is being
concerned
and scared, but still having that inner peace and that inner trust that someone is taking care of everything. And this is important because sometimes we think that if you have belief, there should be no fear at all. And that's also another misunderstanding, because if there were no fear at all, how would I seek refuge into God? It's like all our human emotions are created for a purpose, and they're all there to take us back to God and to connect to Him, to get to know Him, and not just for nothing. And because there is a difference between fear with trust and fear and being terrified and with despair and no hope. Yeah, thank you. That's I think it's important. So belief requires the surrender, and with the surrender will come the trust and the tawakkul, inshallah. And that's very important. Otherwise, the fear will be terrifying. So far, what we observed personally, we observed that people are created through two parents. And we believe that's the way they are brought into being. Maybe now we, with the case of Zakaria alayhi salam, we said, okay, God is powerful over all things. If he wills an old bearing couple to have a child, it is possible. But now, even that belief is being shaken. And suddenly, it seems like that's not the only way. Or at least we can ask ourselves. So far, we have observed that that's the way people are created, that's the way people are brought into existence. However, can we be sure that this is the only way people can be created? Is there no other way? At least now we can question our certainty about this is the way it has to happen. Because when we assume, or if we assume that this is the only way, it would be like saying that God has to create in a particular way. When in fact, what we observed so far was God's way of creating. He's the one who created people in this way, and we observed it, and we made a conclusion. So we cannot say that, bring it back and think that this is the way he has to create. We cannot constrain God by his own way of creating. Let me give a very simple example. Inshallah, it will help us understand the point. If I come to work every day at, let's say, 8 a.m., let's say I'm self-employed because I want the free will to be clear there, because we can say, no, that's how it is, that's the regulation of the work, and I have to be there. So let's say I'm self-employed, it's my own office, and I decided to be at work every day at 8 a.m. And someone else is a neighbor in a neighbor office, observes that, and for months she sees me coming every day at 8 a.m. And then she concludes that when it's 8 a.m., Yamina has to be at work in her office. Would that be correct? Obviously, I'm there at 8 a.m. because I chose to do so. And I may choose to carry on going to work at 8 a.m. and I may change it, or someday some special thing happens, something special happens, and it may require that I decide to change the timing. So just because that's what I did for a long time, it does not mean that I have, now it became a rule and I am bound by the rule. This is exactly how God creates. He cannot be bound by the way he creates. And this is just a simple example to illustrate free will. So God creates because he chooses so, not because he has to. Nothing limits his power. There are no constraints. Everything is the result of his will. But usually when we live in a state of ghafla, and it seems that everything is following a routine, the sun rises and then sets, and I go and do this, and I breathe and I live, and so we forget the aspect that looks to God, wajhullah. We forget that everything is an ayah bearing a message from God, and we start taking things for granted, and it seems like there is a necessity. They have to happen in a certain way, and that's why when one day we wake up and someone very close to us is not living anymore, we are shocked, because it's suddenly that illusory perception of the world collapses. Suddenly, that person is not breathing anymore, is not alive anymore, is not in this world anymore. So it's very important to live with this consciousness and to renew this consciousness that everything is a result of this will, of God's will. This is the gist, the core, the essence of Tawheed. This is the essence of believing in God and God alone. This is the essence of surrender, because I can only surrender when I'm sure and certain, and my heart is satisfied that everything is under the control of God alone, and nothing else can harm me or can do anything unless bi'idhnillah, by God's live. And this is the only way I can trust Him and surrender and submit to His will, and not fear other things, other powers, other whatever illusions we have about the rest of the creation. Everything else is created, everything follows His will and His will alone. And so God does not need a father or parents to create a human being. Yes, He creates through, most of the time we see Him creating through parents, but that was supposed to be an ayah, a sign reflecting the divine power, the divine will, the divine attributes of God. But when we do not interact with creation as ayat, then we fall into the trap of shirk, and that's repeated again and again in the Quran. Those who commit shirk because they didn't see the signs of God. So God does not need a father for Isa alayhi salam. He doesn't need parents to create a human being. He created Adam without him. However, the fact that He creates with parents should be an opportunity for us to get to know Him with His names, not to be an obstacle to see the divine activity, the activity of rububiyyah within those creation. So far, that's how He created us. He is creating us. And that is why we only know that way, but this does not exclude other ways of creating. We cannot limit God with His own creation. When He wills a thing to be, He says onto it, be, and it is. Kun fayakun. So again, this is an opportunity for us to stop and question what we take for granted in creation. And we need to again see the divine will in every event, in every creation. And I think that's the essence of these stories here. And it's not easy to grasp, to taste, but if we do, then it will be very easy to surrender. Very easy to surrender, provided that that's our intention, because it's still our free choice. But it becomes very easy because we will have all the reasons to trust, to believe, to trust, because we will be so sure that there is only one source, and that one source, that one God, is infinitely compassionate, infinitely powerful. It's not like he is generous and helpful and compassionate, but he doesn't have the power to help us. So life will be completely different. It transforms who we are, how we interact with the world. It transforms our fear from a hopeful and peaceful, hopeful fear. Well, in this case, it would be the other way. From a terrifying fear into a hopeful fear, a fear that takes us back to the source of mercy and help, a fear that becomes actually like a burak, like the mount in the ascension, in the mi'raj of the Prophet ﷺ. It becomes like a burak. That fear is what connects us back to our Rabb. And then in ayah 21, he said, so Jibreel alayhi salam, Gabriel is saying, this is what your sustainer says. It is easy for me, and we shall make him an ayah, a sign unto people, and a mercy from us, and it is a thing decreed. So the identical phrase is used in ayah 9, remember, in relation to the announcement of Yahya's birth to Zakaria alayhi salam. And in both cases, the implication is that God can and does bring about events which may be utterly unexpected, especially in this case, or even inconceivable. I mean, it's not easy to conceive that a woman is going to have a child without ever being touched by anyone. This matter at the end, the fact that it says, and it is a thing decreed, meaning that since God decided so, therefore it will be. So only God's will is necessary for anything to be or to exist. And if this is the case, then the importance of prayer, the importance of petitioning God and asking for his help becomes very, 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 very important. The most important thing in our life, because only his will is necessary, nothing else is necessary. Which means anything else, maybe, may not be, it's his decision. If he wants it to be, it is, and if he doesn't, it is not. So instead of saying, please, for instance, give me health so that I can have a child. Why are you making the health a condition to the child? Say, give me a child. He may give you health with it. He may, whatever. Just go directly to him. Do not make other things conditions.
And also, we see this in the world, in nature, that there are all these patterns, regularities, but there are always exceptions. Every single so-called natural law has an exception to it. It's as if to give us the indication that, listen, there is an order. The one who's creating all this, there must be an order, but that order is not bound by rigid kind of formulas. He does what he wishes. I mean, I gave this example earlier, but I want to give it again. It's so beautiful, the way in which water behaves. Between 0 and 4 degrees, it behaves in a way that's completely different at other temperatures. Basically, normally as it cools off, it should get denser, but it becomes between 0 and 4. As the temperature is dropping, it actually expands. It needs to contract. All the other liquids and water in other temperatures, when they get colder they get denser. But between 0 and 4 degrees, it does the opposite. It becomes less dense, and the density goes down. And then when you look at science textbooks, they will just say this is a peculiar behavior of the water. That's it. Like there isn't. And what's happening? Well, the molecules are expanding instead of contracting, but they contract at other temperatures when it becomes cool. But in this between 0 and 4, that's how they behave. We put a name, but it's an amazing exception why a molecule behaves completely differently in a colder temperature, in other temperatures except for 0 and 4. And
Even
then
at 0 degrees Celsius, you will find liquid and ice. And that's why we call them critical points. Why? Because it should be one or the other. No, it's only after a while that we'll find only ice. But for a certain time, you will find 0 degrees. Both. It exists in both states.
That's another.
And we give them name because we cannot explain. Actually, even if it was always 0 becomes suddenly ice, we cannot explain. We just take it for granted because we saw it again and again, and that's it. There's no explanation. And what we are saying, the law is only a description of what's going on. It's not making it. It's not a requirement.
And in this case, for instance, this exception is extremely important because it allows the lakes and the oceans and seas to freeze from the top. Because if the ice, as if it was denser, it would have to sink to the bottom. So the seas and lakes would have started freezing from bottom up, because the colder it becomes heavier, it goes down. But because there is this reversal through that,
only for water,
and only in these
when it's hot, the molecules expand when it's hot. It's the other way around with water.
And so only water between these 2 degrees, 0 and 4. Water behaves the same in other degrees.
No, it doesn't behave in the same way in other degrees. Can you imagine when it's under 0, the ice doesn't get more dense, it floats, it doesn't go down, it doesn't.
It's between 0 and 4, there's this special rule, and that allows life to exist at the bottom of the seas and lakes. So it is, I mean, like, clearly the world is run with compassion, and if need be, things are changed to help the needs of the animals. There are so many examples like this that we think it's impossible, but actually it is. If it happens, and then we put another name, it's an exception rule. But
actually, it happens even outside the rule, the so-called rules, what we think are rules, which are actually rules. They are laws of compassion, laws of rahmah, laws of generosity, not laws of nature. Because, as I said, if you take them as laws of nature, they're only describing what's going on. It's not it doesn't mean anything else. But even in our life, like, things that don't follow the expectations happen all the time, but most of the time we're not aware of it. Maybe I had shared this anecdote with you once. It was in winter, and I was leaving my office and walking home. It's a short distance, like less than a mile. And it was really cold outside. And when I was leaving, it was like almost Maghrib time. It was a long day, and for some reason, I was thinking, it seems like a routine. Like, this is what I do every Thursday. It was either Tuesday or Thursday. This is what I do every Thursday. I leave the offices this hour and then walk home, and then I go have a little break and then do the prayer. And I was telling myself, but actually it seems like this, but this is not how it is. Look, for instance, the weather changes every day. I was trying to remind myself that life is not a routine, that there is divine will coming up. And as I was thinking about it and walking, a lady in the street, it was the first time that someone stops, and I thought she's going to ask for an address or something, but no, she says, it's very cold, I'll give you a ride. And I said, you know, I live very close, but she insisted, it's very cold, I already stopped. So I go in, and then when I come to the end of the road, she has to go all the way inside. And I said, there is no need, you carry on your way. It's a short walk to the building. And she insisted again, no, we're already in the car. I'll take you to the building. And so when she came in to the building, she entered, she realized, she said, oh, this is where I was supposed to go. I thought I had to carry on the main road, but actually the friend I was going to visit lives here as well. So for her, she was going to get lost, but she didn't get lost. She was brought to exactly where she was supposed to be. And for me, she asked me, do you know so-and-so? I said, no, I don't know my neighbors really. She said, okay, let's introduce you to her. And so after a few minutes, we were sitting with these two ladies. I was sitting with these two ladies and getting to know a neighbor. And I told myself, okay, now that routine that I had said I would go as usual was definitely broken that way. It seems like from nowhere. Of course, you can explain it with something. The woman came and stopped. But as far as I was concerned, it was something different, and the routine was changed. And actually, if we are careful a little bit, we will see that our life is not a routine, a mechanical routine as we think. It's like all people look like each other. Someone saying all people look like each other because they have two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Yes, but they're all very different. And so is our everyday. When we intentionally look at it, we'll see that every day is very different. The sky is very different. The lighting when at Maghrib time is each time so different. When I look through the window, every day is so very different. And it is important to see that there is choice, that there is will, and everything is created intentionally. Inshallah. So God's will is necessary. It says this matter is decreed. If He has decreed so, then it will be, and that's it. And everything else, not everything else, everything is dependent on God's will, whether it is a father, younger parents, older barren parents, fruits coming from an orchard, or fruits coming to Maryam alayhi salam from nowhere by God's grace. It is He who gives life to all living beings through lifeless water, for instance. We take it for granted, but that's a miracle. How can life be given to living things through lifeless water? So He does create whatever He wills. Just as water is an ayah, like a post sign indicating a powerful and life-giving creator, so that when we pour water on a plant, a dying plant, and it resuscitates and becomes alive and green and bright, that shouldn't be an obstacle to see the life-giving process that's going on there. it becomes an obstacle only when we are in ghafla. When we take it for granted, we say, oh yes, it needs water. Yes, but it needs water, but water can't be giving the life to it. It's like, yes, to put the light on, I have to put the switch on, but the switch is not what's producing the light. They are signs, they are like post sign indicating a creator beyond whatever we see. And we see the life. We see the life, we witness it, we see the power, we see the knowledge involved. And all those, when we consciously look at them, we understand that you can't give them to the plant itself, to the earth, the air, the sunlight, or the water itself. So they become all like mirrors reflecting the divine attributes. And so are other causes, whether young or old parents, or the breathing of his spirit in the creation of a human being, or whatever. And what is interesting here is how Maryam alayhi salam accepted the divine decree, despite the seemingly very odd, strange, and difficult situation, because she has that belief, she has that connection with God, she has that trust, and so she accepts, she surrenders, and that's very, very important. In ayah 22, we're told, so she conceived him, meaning the child, Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, then withdrew herself with him to a remote place. Meaning after she became pregnant, she withdrew herself with him to a place far away, probably isolated herself. Maybe so that people don't ask her questions. What is she going to do with the people around her, her family? Maybe fearing accusations, because we'll see later that she was accused of unchastity. In 23, we're told, and the throes of childbirth drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. She said, oh, would that I have died before this, and had been a thing quite forgotten. It's interesting that the birth is not without labor pain. I would have expected like it's miraculous, so no need for pain, but it's not the case. The child is born as every other child, and she even needed support. So the pain drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. So she needs support, and she goes to the tree, to the trunk. And again, Maryam knows she is the recipient of a mighty miracle from her Rabb. She knows she was announced the birth of a pure child. She knows she's bearing a special child. Yet she feels very powerless. She feels helpless and anxious. So much that she cries, would I have died before this and had been a thing forgotten. And this reminds us again that she is human. These special people are not special because they are not human. They are special in their humanity. And she experienced human vulnerability. She experienced the helplessness. And it's because of that that she can be the recipient of God's mercy and generosity and protection. Remember, what we always say is the need is the key to getting to know God with his beautiful attributes. The need is the key to getting to taste those qualities and become close to him. If I have no fear, no anxiety, I will never feel the need to ask for help from my Rabb. I wouldn't know myself as a abd, and I wouldn't know that I am the recipient of rububiyyah and recipient of the gifts and the blessings of rububiyyah. And in 24, then a voice called out to her from beneath her, "Do not grieve. Surely your Rabb, your Lord, your sustainer, has made a stream to flow beneath you, underneath you." So some commentators believe that the voice is Gabriel's voice. Gabriel is saying this to her. Others said it was Isa alayhi salam. The first group who said Jibril, they argue that Isa's speaking miracle occurs for the first time when she takes him to her people, so it couldn't have been him. And also, Jibril alayhi salam is the one who is the messenger from the beginning. Whatever, what matters is that she is comforted here. Do not grieve, she's told, do not grieve. There is an acknowledgement of her sadness, of her anxiety and her grief in this difficult situation. And she's provided with water, which is again, there is hikmah in this, because after birth, the mother feels very thirsty. She needs liquids for breast milk. And again, as we mentioned earlier, being a believer in God and relying and trusting Him alone does not mean that we don't feel anything. If we imagine that we're not feeling anything, it means we're just suppressing our feelings, and we're not using them in the way they were supposed to be used as guidance to take us back to our Rabb. So when people claim that in the name of tawakkul ala Allah, trusting in God, they're actually, in the name of tawakkul ala Allah, they shortcut the anxiety and the fear. That's not possible, because the fear and the anxiety were supposed to be the means to ask for help and get it. It's like the stomach, the hunger. It's like without stomach, without hunger, food wouldn't be food. And it is because we can feel, we can grieve, that we can appreciate the blessing of mercy, and in this case for Maryam alayhi salam, the blessing of mercy and comforting. She's being comforted. And even the water is being offered to her as a comfort, as a sign that her Rabb's mercy is with her. She knows that, but still we need the reminder. There is also a sign to this in the fact that it says that the voice came from beneath, which made some people think that it's Isa alayhi salam, which is when in a difficult situation, some people said, we call unto God for help, and we expect the help to come from above, so to speak, like something unrelated to the situation we are in. And the voice coming from beneath has been understood as an allusion to the help coming from within the difficulty itself. The solution comes from the problem. The prayer comes from within the need and the anxiety. And it is what transforms the difficulty into blessing. It becomes like the giving birth to Isa. The difficult situation gives birth to a blessing, a new consciousness, a new degree of getting closer to God, knowing Him with new levels of divine names from different aspects, new blessings. Or like Yunus alayhi salam's, what was it? Fish being what brought him to salvation to the shore of the sea. And together with water, Maryam is also provided with food. So in ayah 25, sorry, we told, and she is told, and shake towards you the trunk of the palm tree. It will drop on you fresh, ripe dates. And here there are two miracles, the shaking of the tree and the fresh, ripe dates. It's interesting that this woman who just gave birth and is therefore very weak and exhausted is asked to shake the trunk of the palm tree. I mean, how can she possibly do that? How can even a strong person shake the trunk of any tree? And especially of a palm tree. And especially from the description of the trunk, it seems like this tree is not a full tree with leaves and everything, with branches. It seems like it's an old trunk remnant of a tree. So it must be old, therefore thicker. And many things have been said about this. One of them is the fact that in the mihrab, when Zakaria alayhi salam came and found the fruits with Maryam, the fruits came to her without taking any action. But after giving birth, when she was weaker, she is asked to shake the tree, to take action, which means to take an action, however small it is. And also the action she is asked to take seems to be impossible. Like, rationally speaking, if we were asked to do something like that, something parallel to the shaking of a tree, first, shaking the thick palm tree is not possible. Plus, on top of that, you are very weak. Like in life, it's like you understand that you have to deal with a situation that seems impossible to achieve. So how can she possibly shake the tree? However, what is required here is really her submission to the divine will, because her actions are not what creates the result. They do not possess creative power. They are only her prayer. They are only the timing, the petition for the answer. So when we understand that our actions do not create, then we won't say it's impossible. Because if I say it's impossible for me to do, it means I think when I shake something small, when I do things, I have the illusion that I am the one creating them, creating things. But actually, if you stop and think about it, what can we create? I cannot even sustain my own life, my own breathing. If my hand stops moving, I cannot do anything about it. So when I am aware of who I am, when I'm aware of my limitation, and therefore of the gifts that when I take action and things happen, they're actually gifts, then if Allah says, shake the tree, and it says, it will drop on you fresh, ripe dates. Like, it has been decreed that the fresh dates will drop. So you do whatever you want, you can, which in this case, she can't really shake the tree, but she can touch it. And that's her prayer, that's her. And she touches the tree in surrender to the divine order, shake. She's asked to shake it. She does whatever she can. She touches it. And the dry tree, not only it's unshakable from her perspective, but also it's dry. It doesn't have anything. It's just a trunk. And now, she is told, it will drop on you fresh, ripe dates, and the tree gives her fresh fruits. And again, this is a miracle or a reminder that causes or our actions do not create, they cannot create. They are a way to petition divine help and providence. And just like Maryam had a child with the blowing of the Spirit in her without any father, the tree bore fruits with the touch of Maryam's hand. And it is not her touch that created the fruits in the dry tree, but the divine decree, it will drop on you fresh, ripe dates. And the touch was made a, how would you say, Isra Bahana. It was made into a
excuse.
An excuse. Yes, thank you. So the blowing, that was the excuse. What matters is that God decreed it. And when it's decreed, it happens. But of course, she surrendered to the divine will. She did touch. She didn't say, how can I shake this tree? I cannot shake it, therefore I'm not going to do anything. Can you see the surrender and the trust? Can you see if we can live our life in this way? Subhanallah, mashallah. Like, what a beautiful word, but what an easy and freeing life it would be. If only we could believe and surrender totally into God and trust Him. So this is a lesson in surrender and submission to the divine will. And often we resist by making excuses. And for instance, it's not possible, this tree, no one can shake it, it's too thick, too strong. And so our excuses may be totally correct. But the fact that we cling on to them is not because they are correct or not, is because we are not willing, we refrain from surrendering. Because if we surrender, surrendering doesn't mean that, like, God knew that what the tree was and in which situation she was, and even if she shaked it, it wouldn't be from her power. So when we start rationalizing, we are not surrendering. We don't have the intention to surrender. We're making excuses. Those excuses may be totally correct. They are still excuses. Because no one told you this tree, and she was not told, this tree is very easy to shake, so shake it. She was told, shake it, that's all. No one said it was easy to shake. And when we refrain from surrendering, we're only depriving ourselves from being, surprised in a positive way, surprised at God's endless mercy in unexpected ways, as we're told in the ayah, وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَالِغُ أَمْرِهِ قَدْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدْرًا. Just such a beautiful ayah. It says, and God, He, meaning God, provides for him, for human beings, in a manner beyond all expectation. Like, why do we insist in limiting ourselves with what we know? If we were always limited with what we know, there would be no computer today, there would be no telephone, because they would say there is no such a thing. And many of those first creations, inventions, people were like laughing at them. What do you mean? Like, he says God will provide for him in a manner beyond all expectation. من حيث لا يحتسب ومن يتوكل, and for anyone who places his trust, who trusts in God alone, God is enough for that person. من يتوكل على الله فهو حسبه. Can you imagine? If we try it, but we think we need to understand it, and then we will trust. You cannot understand it. How can you understand that the tree will be shaken or not, but the inexisting fruits, suddenly the fruits will come and will drop to you? Because that's not how creation is. When we say I will understand it, it means I am limiting my present with what I know from the past. And why should I limit my present with the past? It's like in the past I was a small child. If the child limited herself with her experience, she will never be an adult. It's good that no one listens to us and we just grow and the world just is created. But when we do not surrender in certain situations, we make our life harder and we deprive ourselves from those happy surprises, from being provided in a manner beyond expectation. And we wouldn't know that God is enough for us unless we actually trust. You cannot, well, anyway, so it's about living, trusting, and surrendering, submitting to the divine will. Truly, God always attains to his purpose, and indeed unto everything has God appointed its measure, its term and measure, which means everything is under God's, his will is not only at the beginning of the creation, but it's not only that he creates us from a mother and father, but right now our life is in his hands, is under his control. So instead of making excuses to resist, let's make everything, inshallah, an excuse to surrender and submit to the divine will. Because whatever we say and do is truly an excuse and a petition, a prayer. And it is that spirit of prayer that connects us with divine power, with divine creativity and help and protection and mercy. And that's the essence of prayer. And we're talking here about everything is in a sense a prayer. All our needs, when we're conscious, we become conscious that we have needs and we cannot support them, we cannot take care of them. And so our life becomes, from one aspect, a life of prayer, and therefore, inshallah, of witnessing this unexpected providing and mercy and help coming in unexpected ways. And in ayah 26, she is told, so eat and drink and let your eye be gladdened. Then if you see any mortal, any human being, say, surely I have vowed to fast to the merciful Rahman, so I shall not speak to any human being today. So Maryam is invited to eat and drink and be happy, to enjoy herself. وَقَرِّ عَيْنًا. Literally, it's let your eye be happy, but it means you be happy, enjoy whatever you have, enjoy the food that's been miraculously offered to you, enjoy the offerer, enjoy the mercy and the generosity behind the way it is, that reflects in the way it is being offered to her, and maybe also her newborn child. Then she is asked to fast from speaking to anyone. And again, remember when Zakaria alayhi salam asked for a sign, he was told to keep silent. And here again, Maryam alayhi salam is not asking for a sign. She is asked to fast. And we can understand from one perspective at least. I'm sure there are many, many other things here. But for those who believe that the tree produces the fruit, you need the tree. Without tree, there cannot be fruits. Without strength, you cannot shake the tree. Without parents, you cannot have children. Or that God can only create a human being through both parents. How can, if someone believes this way, if someone perceives the creation in these terms, how can anyone explain the miraculous conceptions of Isa alayhi salam, of Jesus, to these people, to this mindset? Whatever Maryam would have said, they would have never believed her. They could not have grasped the situation. They would accuse her of unchastity, and that's what they did. So the wisest way is to keep silent. For Maryam alayhi salam, her silence is ubudiyya, because she's obeying the divine command again. She said, do not speak. So it is a divine command, and she is again obeying, surrendering. And it is wisdom. It's a time for her to adapt to the situation, a time to pray and renew her belief and trust in her Rabb. We can see that she's a believer. She is someone who trusts in her Rabb. But all this event must have increased her certainty, her trust, because she is now bihaqqa yaqeen, like she's living the miracle. And for the wise outside Maryam alayhi salam, for those who are who hear about her story, it's a time of listening to the astonishment that this story engenders within us. I mean, truly, this is almost unbelievable. I'm saying between. It's not unbelievable, but at first when you hear it, it's almost like unbelievable. So amazing, the story. And what it produces in us is a sense, a feeling of astonishment. And so if it's a time to stop and listen to the astonishment, like we also keep quiet, keep the fast, keep silent, and listen, and ask for the guidance and for answers. And one of the questions that came to me when I just stopped and reflected on that astonishment was, how is it possible? Is it possible? How is it possible? And the moment I articulated it in those words, then the answers started coming. Because then you start realizing that, hey, what about the daily events that we take so much for granted? They also deserve the same awe and astonishment. How is it possible for water to enter a plant and it becomes alive and green? This is lifeless water. How is it possible that the earth rotates around itself and around the sun in space without pillars or strings or anything, and in such a precise order that all our calendar and time and everything is set according to it? How is it that as soon as a baby is born, milk follows? And you can question anything and everything around us that we take so much for granted. And the same question is we can ask the same question for all of them. And we realize that truly, they all deserve that same awe and astonishment. And if we don't, it's because we take them for granted because we've seen them again and again. And it's like if we saw women having a child without father many times, and afterward we say, oh yes, we will give it a name. We say this is the law of fatherless child or whatever, and that's it. It becomes like as if we know and we understand. And so it is, this story is really important in the sense that it puts us back into that state of seeing the face of God in everything. Remembering that everything is a sign from God indicating and bearing messages from Him about Him. Which is how we live our Iman, how we practice Tawheed, how we live in the name of God, Bismillah, how we live our ubudiyah, how we become aware of rububiyyah and be grateful for it. Be grateful for all the miracles that we take so much for granted. And there are levels of miracles that are the usual miracles and the unusual miracles, but they are all miracles, they're all ayat. Alhamdulillah. And when her people accused her of unchastity, Maryam ﷺ remained silent as she was ordered, and she pointed to the child. So in ayah 27 we're told, and in time she returned to her people, carrying the child with her. They said, "O Mary, you have indeed done a grave thing. O sister of Aaron," ayah 28, "O sister of Aaron, of Harun, your father was not a bad man, and your mother was not a loose woman." And what she does, she's still keeping quiet, and she points to the child, and that's incomprehensible to them because, and they sound angry. So in ayah 29, we're told, thereupon she pointed to him, to the child. They exclaimed, "How can we talk to one who is still a little child in the cradle?" So it's clear that they are like, what do you mean? Like, it's not possible. And again, for the same reasons, because they assume from past experience that children don't speak when they are newborn. Children speak after a year or two. And it's okay to say, this is what I know, but the believer is open to be surprised that, because he knows that what makes a child speak when she is 1 year or 2 years old? Again, it's divine will. There is no rule that children speak all at this time. And we do forget, we do take things as necessary. I remember my own son. He was 2 years old and he was not making any sounds, because we think that, oh, he started making sounds now, and so slowly he's speaking, and as if it didn't happen by divine will. And so when he was 2, I was like a little bit, didn't say to anyone, but inside in my heart was like, is he mute or something? And I knew that children may speak at different ages, but he made only 2 noises. He never called like mommy or daddy or anything like small babies do. And I knew because I had a friend as a child who spoke when she was 5. She never spoke anything. She was totally mute. When she was 5, she started speaking. When we went to school, she did very well. So you can see that it's divine will, but still you forget. And when this child started speaking at 2, there were 3 languages spoken in our household, and lots of people said he's not speaking because of the languages, of the different languages, but his sister spoke much earlier with the different languages, and also still he could have made different sounds that was nothing to do with the languages. But when he started speaking, it was clear by divine will, because he started making small sentences in all the languages he was hearing. And very quickly he spoke better than kids who started speaking much earlier. So you can see that just because it's happening gradually doesn't mean that it's not happening by divine will. And it's the same here. We take it for granted, so they say, how can he speak? Like, are you messing up with us? So it's one thing to be astonished, it's another to disbelieve, as though children have to speak at a certain age. To be astonished, to be open is okay, as we've seen with Zakaria alayhi salam and Maryam. That's how we grow, that's how we learn new things. If we were not astonished, it means we would be not moved by anything new. It means, how can I appreciate the difference? But here there is a sense of like disbelief, as though children cannot speak as newborn and they have to speak at a certain age. And that's because we forget that it is all under the control of divine will. And then the newborn, Isa, Jesus alayhi salam, is made to speak by God's permission, to show them that God creates what he wills in the way he wills. He makes a child speak whenever he wills. And that is his own creation, cannot limit him, as we may assume. And in ayah 30, he said, meaning the baby, the little child, Jesus, behold, I am a servant of God. He has given me the book and made me a prophet. Inni Abdullahi atani al-kitaba wa ja'alani nabiyya. Subhanallah. So, inshallah, let us fast from looking at things around us for themselves without seeing the messages, the ayat within them. And let us fast from the ghafla perception of the world and the creation around us. And let us pray to see wajhullah and seek wajhullah in everything, inshallah. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وارنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين. Thank you. I think I will stop here because for me there is so much here to digest.
Yamina, this is a brilliant discussion, Jazakallah khair, about Maryam's reaction and surrender. But how would you respond to the question of she was given clear instruction, for example, to move, to shake the tree, not to speak, so on and so forth? In other words, if you or I or anyone else are facing a challenge, and in the middle of this challenge, we receive direct instruction, do this, don't do that, from Allah, it seems that, yes, we will follow. It seems that surrender becomes easier.
Thank you for the comment, answer, Maha. For me, for many, many years, this is what I used to tell myself. And there were like big challenges. And during those times, this is exactly what not in reference to this particular surah, but it seemed to me like if I had specific instructions, it would be so easy to surrender. That's how it felt to me. And later, now I can look at myself then and understand how I was making that an excuse for resisting. Meaning that I thought when the instruction comes, if there were an instruction, if I felt like this is what to do, then of course I will surrender. But in fact, the instruction, I'll talk about the clarity afterwards. The instruction is going to come after when we are in a state of surrender. If I'm not in a state of surrender, I will not be able to hear the instruction, the message, if you see what I mean. The heart is not tuned into the instruction. So how does the surrender start? For instance, that time, the situation seemed like a challenge, and it goes back to what Isra started with at the very beginning. And the challenge was like, this is a challenge. Like, if I had been asked, it shouldn't be here. And since it's happening beyond my will or my choice, how do I deal with it? As if I am the one who is going to deal with it. That attitude itself is about, I am going to do something about it. The interaction, the perception, self-perception, and the perception of the situation is totally outside the realm of surrender. As if I am disconnected and separate from my Rabb, and something came to me from him, and now I'm struggling with it. Whereas when you are in a state of surrender, in that hal, that state of being that is totally conscious of the connection, then it's not something befalling me suddenly. It becomes whatever the befalling is I would accept it with grace, with acceptance, with surrendering to whatever is going on, and wondering, asking, like, what do I do with it? What is the meaning of all this? And it doesn't mean that there is no anxiety, there is no fear, but there is no despair, there is no being terrified, being what will happen to me. There is a peace within the anxiety. The anxiety then becomes like the string that takes me back to the answer. The voice comes from beneath, from beneath the situation. Now, as far as the clarity is concerned, the more surrender, the clearer we are. But even in the beginning, so how do I know if I don't feel it's clear? Ask yourself, whatever it is, we are accountable for our niyyah, for our intention. If I am not sure about the instruction, I make the intention to surrender and to act Bismillah, which is making in fiqh terminology, it's ijtihad. I make ijtihad for my situation. Ijtihad, it means I'm making an effort in the name of God, not independently of him. I seek his guidance, and then in that state, even if the instruction I miss interpreted it. I did not get it right. Still, إنما الأعمال بالنيات. Still, because my intention was to surrender and to follow the instruction, it's almost like I would be guided. The GPS, you know, when you go out of the wrong exit, what happens? The GPS, what it does, it resets itself. So things reset themselves to show me again the right way. Of course, if I am in a state of anania, of like ego-centered, it's about me, I may take it like I did this and I resist changing because it's about me. Do you think I made a mistake and things? But if I'm truly, my intention is to surrender, then okay. The moment it becomes clear to me that I was going in the wrong direction, I immediately change the direction. The important thing is not to do to be sure that you're doing the right thing. The important thing is that the intention is always to follow the guidance. And it starts with the intention to surrender. And the more we intend to surrender, the clearer we will hear the instructions. And for me, it was like for years, I was stuck in if only the instructions were clear, I would surrender. And I was thinking of surrendering at a higher level, but start surrendering wherever you are. Wherever we are, there is something to surrender to. And we start wherever we are. Like, there's no need to talk about even if we buy a ticket to go somewhere, a ticket from Philadelphia to New York. When you buy a ticket, you say, I want a ticket to New York. They say, from where? Because we're acknowledging where we are is the beginning of the journey. We can't start the journey without starting where we are. And we think in the beginning, I was like stuck into the destination, but not focusing on where I was. And although it seemed like I was totally well-intentioned, now I realized that it was a hidden way to resist. There are degrees of resisting and degrees of surrendering. Wallahu alam. Like, I don't know how much I could explain it, but I'm using my own experience to share with you, inshallah.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think it really brought something important to our awareness. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for your answer, Sister Yamina, too. And it reminded me, as you were talking, I remembered the story of Joseph, alayhi salam, in Surah 12. There, the father at some point, Jacob, alayhi salam, when he sends his sons out for a second time with Benjamin, he gives them instructions. He says, enter from different doors. Don't all of you enter from the same door to the city. And then he adds, I can't change anything from God, but I'm just giving a suggestion. So even prophets like Prophet Yaqub, he had surrendered and he kept up the hope because he had an indication that that there is something more about Joseph coming, but he didn't know how. And but he just trusted and walked. And his suggestion actually didn't work out in the short run. It didn't seem to work, but actually in the long run, it was good for Benjamin to be kept. And those of you who know the story, it all works out perfectly at the end. So same with Joseph. When the wife of the Aziz is after him, she wants him, and he says no, and then they say, okay, we're going to throw you into prison. He says, okay, if this is the deal, then I prefer prison. At that point, he doesn't know his options. He doesn't know, like, he doesn't have the bigger picture, but they are putting in front of him this, that either prison or do this. And he has a general instruction that you don't go in that path of fornication. So he's not going to do that. So he's okay, I pick this. And he surrenders. I mean, it's not the best option, it looks like, but actually it becomes, like, he didn't know that going into prison is actually his first towards becoming a minister. He didn't know, but in his circumstances,
whatever is available at that time,
he picked the best. There are instructions that you don't do certain things, and he doesn't. But then the rest, he doesn't know, and it unfolds in a way that he couldn't have imagined. Similarly, he wanted to get out of the prison, told the person, when you come out, tell me about tell the king about me. And the person forgot, but he tried his part, so.
And he does not rationalize when he has only those two options. He doesn't rationalize that prison is very bad, I can't go there, therefore this is my only choice.
Yeah, and similarly, and this is contrasted with the brothers. The brothers are very upset with the father, and they're very jealous. And they say, well, we have to get rid of him so that we can get more attention. They don't say, well, we really want attention, but of course we cannot hurt an innocent person. We have to find another way. We have to find another way.
They don't say that. And later we will be good. It means that they do know that it means that deep down, when we stop and ask the question, like, what do I surrender to now? Usually we can always have like two paths, and even if the one that seems the correct one may not be what we are looking for, or then the surrender means whatever it is, I will surrender. And not justify, because they justify, they say, the brothers say, and next time we will be good.
We just have to take care of this guy, get rid of him, hurt him. And
it means we know it's bad, but what can we do? We need it to get to wherever we want.
And then maybe if you were to ask them, like, why did you do this horrible thing? They could say, well, we wish we had a clear instruction. We wish that a sound came from heaven and said, no, don't even think about that. And then we wouldn't have done it.
They had the instruction.
They had the instruction, but instruction, like, I find myself in those situations too. Sometimes I know this is the right response, but then, no, I can't afford that. So there has to be some other way, because
so we rationalize.
But then I do tell myself that if God really wants me to do that right thing, then he should tell me more clearly.
But like كل إنسان على نفسه بصيرة ولو ألقى معاذيره. Like deep down, if we stop and listen truly, we would know. Like the brothers knew that they were doing something wrong, but they justified it
because they were caught up in that I have a need and it's not met. It can't be met. It won't be met.
To stop being caught up, and the instruction will get clearer and clearer. But for the moment, wherever we are, pick up the one that seems to be the closer to surrender, even if it seems to be against me.
Jazakallah khair. Again, it was a really nice question that opened up awareness. Jazakallah khair, and Jazakallah khair, Sister Yamina. So the discussion is beautiful, but I guess we should stop here. It's 10:20. And Jazakallah khair again, Sister Yamina. And thank you, everyone. And may Allah bless you all for joining us. And inshallah, we will be advancing in the path of surrender this week.
Inshallah.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, and see you next week, inshallah.